Do you find yourself like yelling at your kids all day long? And then at the end of the day, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible parent. This is awful. Like, I feel terrible about myself. Let me know if you've been there. I think as parents, we absolutely have all been there. My name is Dale Ecuyer, and I help families create health and harmony using holistic mental wellness solutions. And I have Adrienne Bishop here with me. She's a certified positive discipline parent educator and a life coach, and she specializes in helping overwhelmed parents become more confident and effective in parenting. So there's definitely more effective ways to do stuff. So let's talk about, Adrienne, what we can do to really help ourselves deal with the stresses of parenthood better.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Dale. It's really interesting if we think about our situation that we're in now as parents, very, very different than it was a little more than a year ago, right? So we are around our kids more. We are having to help them with school, which wasn't a situation in the past. So now we've become teacher. So now we have multiple roles. And so things have just gotten more complicated for parents. And a lot of parents that I actually work with, some of the challenges that they're facing, have come to the surface now before when they weren't as so prominent. And a lot of them have to do with their own emotional regulation. So they're coming to me saying, I'm so angry. I'm yelling more than I want to. And I know this is not how I want to be around my kids. I want to be calmer. I want to be kinder. What I usually tell them is that if you struggle with anger or yelling, you're actually a normal human, right? Like nothing really has gone wrong if you have these challenges. And there's a couple of reasons why. One of them is the way our brain chemistry works. So we have two different brains. We have primitive brain, and then we have our evolved brain, or you want to call it your logical brain. When we're overwhelmed, or when we have a lot on our plates, or the stress level is high, it's very easy for our primitive brain to kick in and see our kids' behavior or misbehavior as a threat to our survival. So we literally see our kids as a threat, and then our primitive brain kicks in because we are already emotional or already kind of stressed. It says, oh, we need to get this to stop. This is a threat. Let's stop this threat so we can feel better. So the quickest way usually to get kids to stop behaving a certain way is to yell. Your brain sees that this works. It goes, oh, guess what you did the other day? You yelled and the kid stopped. And that doesn't always happen, but a lot of times it does, right? So it notes, oh, the yelling, that worked. I got the behavior to stop so I could feel better immediately after that. But the problem is that when we do this and our brain notes that the yelling worked, it becomes more of a habit. You're functioning normally if you struggle with this, is basically what I'm trying to say. The cool thing, though, is that we, being evolved beings, can actually tap into our logical brain and work to reduce the amount of yelling that we do as a reaction. And there's a couple ways I can talk about how to do that if you want me to keep going
definitely.
on that.
Yeah, we want some strategies, we want some tools, but like the awareness that you just brought is huge. Like it's a reaction, but we are evolved, so we can step back and pause and say no, because at the end of the day, we don't feel good about that.
Yeah.
And
right.
If you're doing that all day long, it's like, we don't want this adversarial conflict in the home. Like that's not what we want. That's not what your kid wants either. So it's just a reaction. So give us some strategies to help us, some tools for when we find ourselves just constantly yelling and yelling.
So some of the reasons that we yell is because we don't have any other tools. So this is how we discipline. It's just our go-to. And sometimes we actually think we're actually holding our kids accountable by reacting in this way. Like if we were just cool and calm about it, they wouldn't understand they were doing something inappropriate. So that is definitely something to note. Like, are you believing that your yelling or your way of disciplining is holding your kid accountable? Or if you didn't do that, they would think they were getting away with it. So definitely something to kind of like check in with yourself.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And I do notice a lot of the parents I work with, they have that kind of thought like, oh, well, if I'm just kind and firm, or if I'm calm, that means the kid's going to think their behavior is acceptable. But what I want to propose is that what's happening is actually your child, when you yell, your child is less likely to want to stop that behavior in the long term. So it might stop it in the short term, but the long term they'll repeat it again, because when you yell, they're not taking in any sort of lesson. They're not learning how to change. They're not connecting with you. And so the behavior will just continue. You're not helping them find a new behavior just to move away from that one. And so this is why yelling doesn't work in long-term situations. So we want to make sure that we go to other tools that really will help us to stop reacting in the way that we're reacting to our kids. And so I always ask my parents, in the specific situation that you yelled, so go back to that specific moment. My child wouldn't get ready to leave the house and I was running late and I yelled, time to get out the door, whatever. When that happens, you want to say to yourself, what was I thinking? What was I making it mean about me or making it mean about my child that they weren't moving quick enough? Or what was I projecting into the future as going wrong or something bad was going to happen? And so a lot of parents, when they yell, they're making it mean that something about their kid, that there's something wrong with their child, right? They need to fix it. They're making it mean that they're not a good parent already. Like, if I can't get my kid to do this, that means I'm not a good parent. So then they start to feel very angry around that situation. And then sometimes they'll yell because maybe the kids are fighting and they're like, this is not the way I want my household to be. There should be no fighting. Everything should be peaceful. One of my clients actually said, like, it's just unnecessary for my kids to fight. And I thought that was really interesting. So then she starts getting angry because she's like, this is so avoidable and unnecessary. So isn't that interesting how when you actually talk to people about what they're thinking, it's a little surprising and everybody has a different reason. And so it's important to uncover what is leading you to feeling the anger and then reacting out of yelling. So that's number one. And the way you can do this is just to ask yourself, what am I making it mean that my kids are fighting? What am I making it mean about them and me? Why is it bothering me? And why is it a problem? So those are kind of a couple of the questions I ask usually when it comes to figuring out what the thought is behind your yelling. The next piece is to, once you get the awareness around what's happening in your mind, then you want to decide, well, okay, when this situation happens again, how do I want to feel? And this sounds kind of airy-fairy sometimes when you're like, oh, I can just choose. But we're not going to positive. We're going to neutral. And the neutral feeling is going to be calm. It's going to be acceptance, right? So maybe if your kids are fighting and it does bother you a lot right now, you're just going to go to, I accept that there is fighting happening. Like, I just want to accept the fact that it's actually occurring in my house. Because when we resist something in reality, right? Resisting reality, that causes suffering, causes negative emotion. So we want to learn to accept this is happening. And it's not that we're excusing our kids' behavior. That is not the point at all. Our goal is to get us to be effective as parents. And the way that we can be more effective is to go to a neutral emotion. At some point, you can feel the anger. There's no reason that you should get rid of anger. We can just feel the anger and then we can check in. Oh, wait a second. I know I'm angry because I'm thinking my kids shouldn't be fighting, that it's unnecessary and inappropriate or whatever or avoidable, like my client said. And so because of those thoughts, that's why I'm feeling angry, not because of what my kids are doing. And so this is something that we really need to kind of think on sometimes. Not there yet with my kids aren't making me angry, right? So this can be a concept that takes some time for parents to kind of sink in and really, get in their bones and believe fully. But it is so empowering once you get to that place and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have to feel angry when my kids are fighting. Are you serious? Like, this is an option. And so, or actually react from anger. You can feel anger and then move to a new emotion, but reacting from the anger is very optional along with feeling it eventually. So eventually you're going to feel less angry, less stressed, and those kinds of emotions are going to not occur as often once you're practicing doing these, going to neutral more frequently.
Kind of like taking a pause. It's kind of like taking a pause, sitting back and thinking about it, separating, I love what you're saying about, and I think it's like expectations, like parents think they have to be perfect. There should never be fighting. There should never be conflict, but that's not real life. Exactly. So if you can come at it from a neutral place, like you're saying, without the emotion, and not, if they're looking at you, like, how are you responding? If there's fighting going on and then you're adding more fuel to that fire by screaming.
Oh, yeah.
That's not diffusing the situation by any stretch of the imagination.
No. And have you ever yelled at your kids, stop yelling? Like, I've done that. Like, stop yelling, it's like, oh, right, this is not going to work. It's kind of not modeling what I want to model. So yeah, that's really a really good point is that you do have there might be a need to find a gap is what I call it between the anger and the reaction. One of the things that you can do is do that work later on, like in the evening, and really figure out what you're thinking. So the awareness of the thought and the idea that my kids aren't making me angry. I do have a choice. Just that might give you enough space to actually pause before you react. That's what worked for me, was just knowing I had the option. I could decide. And even if sometimes I did act out of anger, I still knew in the end that it was okay. And then I was learning. I wasn't controlled by it. It didn't control me. And that was so empowering that I was able to kind of move past it eventually when I got much better at redirecting to the new thought. So, so this is a little,
like, get rid of like the us versus them, like the conflict feeling.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Exactly. And the idea that your kids are doing it to you, right? That's another thing. Taking things personally or seeing them as defiant or disrespectful, which is another thought that a lot of my parents have. Like, they're being disrespectful. They're being rude. They're doing it on purpose. They're being defiant. So that goes into kind of another discussion about behavior and what it means. But understanding that the idea that it's possible that your kids are not doing it to you, and you don't need to take it personally. And if you do separate your emotions from their behavior, you're going to be way more effective. And it's not that you're becoming a robot, like, by any means. It's just that you're taking responsibility for your feelings and not blaming someone else or putting it on them. Right. And that feels good. That feels much better.
Yeah, definitely. So you're taking responsibility for your own reaction, which is huge.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I think a lot of parents know that, like, there is a possibility that they don't have to do this. It's just a matter of, like, what does that look like? And how does that really play out in real life? How do I move away from doing this? And one of the things is to recognize what you're thinking and to know that you have a choice. And then the next thing is to move toward those new emotions of it. I love acceptance and I really like understanding. Compassion is another one. If you can't get to calm, which is actually a little challenging when you're having maybe a moment that you typically get very angry about, asking yourself to go to calm might be too much. And that's okay. We're going to stepladder it by going to acceptance. And some of the times I go to acceptance for my own feelings. Like, I'm accepting and I am being compassionate for myself in this moment, for being angry, for being stressed, right? Yeah. So then that helps you to not resist your own emotion around what you're feeling with your kids. The resistance can sometimes cause you to yell and to be more reactive because you're trying to get rid of your feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's so deep, but it's such
it is
important topic. Like, if you can get this into your bones, right? So do you have a discussion afterwards, like with the children, like, how could we have dealt with this better kind of thing?
And sometimes even in the moment, this is my favorite sibling fighting phrase, and go for it, use it. Is this play fighting or real fighting? I'll say that to them in the moment while I see, and I usually know which one it is, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's play fighting and they're all okay. Right. And I'll say there's no real fighting in this house. And so that's my first line of defense to really understand what's happening. My next line of defense is to, number one, if it's like really, really dangerous behavior, we definitely separate kids. I mean, that's number one. We want to keep everybody safe. But if it's not, sometimes I let it play out and then I'll just observe and kind of comment later, or even sometimes during the moment, I'll say, I see a very angry Macklin and I see that Finn is hiding in the corner, and I'll just observe what they're doing and I'll say it because they'll be like, oh, right. Like, that's not really what I want, or that wasn't my intention. And then I'll say, Macklin, you seem sad. And I'll just kind of let him tell me yes or no. Yeah, I'm actually really mad at Finn right now. And then they'll start talking. And usually they'll start talking. And if they're not in a place where they're calm enough, yes, afterward is beautiful. We just go through and we say, I noticed that when you and Mac were playing, you got a little angry when he came into your fort. What's up? And I'll just kind of ask them in that way, like, what's up? What's going on? And sometimes they'll talk and you kind of go from there and start problem solving. But that's, again, like a little more detail for another day. But yes, we want to make sure. So, but I can't do those things coming from anger. I could never, I mean, I could, but it'd be much harder to go over to my kids and say, is this play fighting or real fighting, guys? Right. And then just like back off and let them solve it. It's really going to be difficult if I'm thinking to myself, they should never be fighting. This is unnecessary and unavoidable. If I was thinking those thoughts, I would probably do something very different.
Yeah.
Right.
So good. I mean, just that right there alone is pure gold. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. Changed my whole parenting, everything.
Just one little tweak in your mindset and just the way, and also not beating yourself up. Like you said, I mean, parenthood is no joke. I mean, it is like no handbook when you come home from the hospital, right?
No.
You don't know what you're doing. Each kid is individual. You have the personality thing, and then you add another kid, and then you add being tired or not feeling well. That's another whole topic that I love to talk about. But it's not easy. And moms, you have to stop beating yourself up. But, what I would absolutely encourage you to do, if this is the scenario going on in your house, to get help, reach out for support. There are so many brilliant parent coaches and counselors like yourself that are so valuable, and it'll get you to a happier place quicker.
So fast.
Than if you just keep on going day after day, doing the same thing and expecting a different result, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what I think we do, because we're like overwhelmed and stuff. But it's like, I encourage you, like I've raised 5 kids, so I'm on the other end of it.
Yeah.
I did take parenting classes when my kids were growing up, and it was so valuable just to hear other people's experiences, know that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Know that there are other ways to do it that will bring way more calm and harmony into the home, but you got to get the skills. Don't expect that you know how to do this just because your parents did it. Like, we have to know how to do this. No, maybe your parents did it, but it wasn't the greatest. So, and you're repeating some of that stuff, right? Because that's what we go to, what we knew, but we have to relearn. We have to relearn.
And it's some people think like, oh, if I work with a parenting coach, I'm going to have to do extra work, but it actually ends up relieving you of so much emotional energy, and your workload goes down and your overwhelm goes down. So you have energy to put into other things in your life, and because you already know how to handle things, as opposed to confusion and guilt and overwhelm, right, all the time. And so you're freed up to do other things in your life and enjoy your kids more at the same time. And I've noticed that about like 3/4 of the way through my coaching program, people start talking about other things. They just, even parenting is just not the main thing on their mind anymore. And it's awesome to see that. It's just so awesome. So
it's so rewarding. I mean, I think we're just missing out on so much joy. Like, if we have more cooperation in the family, we have more harmony, and we're teaching our children life skills, like how to work through conflict. Like, of course, kids are going to have fights. I mean, it's normal. Like, it's not a reflection of you. It's just normal life, right? Yeah. But your job is to teach them how to work through that conflict and not to add more fuel to the fire, as they say. Yeah. So, do you do mostly, tell us about your coaching services and how people get a hold of you and all that?
Yeah. So I do a one-on-one coaching program. So it's an hour a week on, over Zoom, just individually personalized. That's solely how I work with parents now. I also do have a free Facebook group. So if you want to kind of learn more about some of the things that I work with on my clients, that's a great place to be. I'm in there all the time. It's called Calm Confident Parenting.
Go in there and take advantage of Adrienne's services. I mean, you're going to get much faster than if you're reading books. Books are great, but when you're like a busy mom, it's not always so easy to sit down and read a parenting book.
Yeah, and then implement it even harder.
Yeah, but I think it's so valuable to have like that one-on-one, like, wow. I mean, if I had done that, like I went to parenting classes and there was, 15 couples in the class. So you can't really get a lot of one-on-one, but it was certainly really, really helpful. But I think one-on-one would have gotten me there faster to a place.
And as you see, like I uncover people's thoughts. And when you're in a group or when you're not in a place where you feel comfortable or like in a space you feel like you can be vulnerable, it's hard to get to those breakthroughs, really uncover what's going on and what's stopping you from, reducing your anger and your yelling, because that is mostly about what's going on in your head. And so being one-on-one is a really safe space to do that. And feels really good to kind of be relieved of all of those thoughts that are weighing you down. Pretty fun. My clients usually come out of the sessions like, yay, feeling good.
Results. It's like, oh man, I love it. I love it. So good. All right, Adrienne, thank you again. Thanks for joining us. Definitely check out Adrienne's page, Calm Confident Parenting. Is that the name of the group?
Yep, that's the group.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. This was golden as always. So good.